Support for your public radio station comes from our members and from Mary Cariola Center, proud supporter of Connections with Evan Dawson, believing an informed and engaged community is a connected one. MaryCariola.org.
From WXXI News, this is Connections. I'm Evan Dawson. Our connection this hour was made this past October when an award-winning newspaper announced it would have to shut down its printing press. The Star-Ledger is New Jersey's largest newspaper, the winner of several Pulitzer Prizes. Turns out there's been plenty of corruption in New Jersey over the years, and the Star-Ledger was often the source to reveal it. But the publisher and the editor said that the changing habits of the American public made the decision to shut down the print edition inevitable. He called it an emotional decision for everyone involved. That's a newspaper that's been doing investigative work for 157 years. A recent survey finds the vast majority of American newsrooms are either shrinking or just trying to sustain current staffing levels. It's not a great time to be a journalist. Nearly half of all American journalists work in newsrooms that cut staffing levels in the past year. So who wants to do this for a living? And is it inevitably going to get worse? Back in 2014, journalists had this rosy notion that social media would be an effective tool. Today, they tend to see social media as the end of journalism. Last week, WXXI's audience stepped up with a very strong fund drive. We're grateful for that. Literally dozens of new members cited the need to protect journalism here and around the world. This hour, I don't want to do a lot of, sort of needless navel-gazing. We want to have an honest conversation about the state of journalism in 2025, and I think we can do that with some of our colleagues here. Gino Finelli is WXXI News investigative reporter. Welcome back. Nice duds today. If you're watching on the YouTube channel, Gino and me looking very twinny.
We were picking out our outfits this morning,
And where were you, Veronica Volk?
I wasn't invited, apparently. I'm feeling very left out.
Senior producer and editor at WXXI News, Veronica also heads up the student journalism program. New Jersey native.
Absolutely.
Did you know that there was corruption in New Jersey?
Everybody knows there's corruption in New Jersey. Yes.
But that's because of the Star-Ledger, I think.
Absolutely, yes.
Did you grow up reading any of the Star-Ledger? I mean, is that like a big deal?
No, we read it was a Gannett paper. The Asbury Park Press was our home paper. So,
yeah, I mean, so again, newspapers, everybody is sort of clear on where this is going. And I want to say from the outset here, if your habits are that you still love to hold a newspaper, like my mother loves to walk to the end of the driveway and pick up a physical newspaper every day, sit down and read it. She loves that. And in 1988, newspaper circulation peaked in this country. That was it. It was almost 40 years ago. So we know where this is going. It doesn't mean that newspapers can't exist in different forms, and we have to be in a lot of different places. But in general, I'll start with you, Veronica. Are you worried that conversations like this get navel-gazy, or do you think these are important conversations for the public to understand what's going on in our world?
Both.
Yeah.
The short answer is both. First of all, we have to make sure that we're not three journalists sitting in a room talking about how we consume our news and therefore sort of like make that the thing that we think everyone else.
Or what I wish everybody else would just do.
Right.
The
like,
same thing forever.
Exactly. Or, well, I got my news this way this morning, so therefore that's how I'm going to make my news for the rest of my career. Mm-hmm. So we got to make sure that we're talking to the people who consume the news. But also, it is important for us, I think, to every once in a while get together and make sure that we're on the same page about the direction that we're going in. I mean, even the three of us talking about this on the air and hopefully bringing in some new voices from our newsroom and putting it out to your callers, maybe we'll get some ideas right here about some things that we can do like right now to sort of reach new people.
Yeah, to that point, listeners, we absolutely want to hear from you. I mean, are we reaching you where you are? Are there times where you think, like, I wonder why WXXI is not on whatever? I was going to say X as like an example, but no, I didn't mean like... I meant like X, Y, and Z, not the platform X.
The platform formerly known as X. So like 10 years ago, I want to say like March 2015, I was on this show and I was on with Gary Craig and Justin Murphy, and we were talking about the future of journalism. And we were very flowery about like Twitter is a great platform. And I wish we had time to pull clips, but we didn't. But it's just interesting to think about how that conversation did not hold up at all. At all. There were some smart things said by the folks who were more seasoned journalists than me, but I was very optimistic and naive.
So naive. Gino Finelli, how do you think things are going in 2025?
Oh, great. Everything's going great. No, I mean, this is something I think about a lot about the modern media landscape, and the problem is, and media literacy is at an abysmal level. Understanding what's good information and what is objective information, what is verifiable, it's a skill a lot of people don't have, and I don't particularly blame them for it because they're inundated day by day with 1,000 different sources that are all skewing in different directions to, feed very niche audiences. There's a lot of confirmation bias news outlets that exist now that exist not to give you good journalism, but to make you feel like you understand the world from your viewpoint better, to reaffirm the biases that you already have. And, when we're talking about the ecosystem that we're in with journalism, my job is not to entertain people. My job is not to, for making bombastic claims or, making people angry or fearful. And those two things are very, very profitable. So we have an extreme amount of podcasts, websites, TV news programs that sell fear. And that is kind of overtaking a lot of the traditional journalism market in a very unfortunate way. That at this point, I think a lot of people don't even understand what journalism is anymore. And it's less about this has the most verified information, and it's the old journalistic adage of the closest version of the truth. It's more, this is the thing that feels the best to me to consume.
Because it confirms my bias.
It confirms my biases, exactly. And if you, whatever that bias might be, whatever the conspiracy might be, there's always someone who's willing to buy it.
Let me give you an example of something I've seen a ton of in the last 5 days. Boy, do people really believe that whatever their bias is politically, Pope Leo has said something that confirms that. And they're like, look what he said about MAGA. Look what he said. Pope Leo almost certainly didn't say whatever quote you shared. I don't mean to disappoint everybody, but whatever Pope Leo quote that you've seen that instantly fires up, that dopamine rush of like, yeah, new Pope, me and him on the same team.
It's
probably a fake quote.
It feels great when the world conforms to everything you already believe. And the sad reality is the world will never do that. And if anything is telling you that, it's lying to you.
But here's to Veronica's point, we've been having media literacy conversations for years. I think schools are talking about, I don't know what is actually being taught. I would love motivated reasoning and confirmation bias and those kind of things to be taught in schools. I don't know if that certainly doesn't solve everything. But how is it 2025? And we have a ton of people who just, and I'm sure I've done it. I'm sure I'm not at the top of the mountain here. But how are we so willing to trick ourselves into believing that some new figure like Pope Leo just believes everything that we believe politically, that we're going to blindly share a quote and not even look to see if he actually said it?
I think your question assumes any sort of intention on behalf of the person who's sharing this quote. It happens automatically. I mean, your brain is wired to follow.
I'm sure I'm not talking about Pope Leo, but I'm sure I fall into that trap
right.
too.
Yeah. Well, I mean, think about, first of all, the fact that a lot of these apps that you're reading these things on are designed to keep you on them. So your tendency to move to a second source or verify that information is not built in to how you use the software. So if I see a quote pop up on Facebook from Pope Leo, I'm not going to open my browser and Google it. That's not what the technology is made to encourage me to do. And also that's not how I'm not going to be rewarded for that, either socially by the people that follow me or, as a culture. We're not praising people who dissent to those things.
No, that's exactly right. And so let me do a little bit of a quiz for Gino and Veronica. You want to do a little quiz? Want to have a little fun here?
Oh, yeah.
Let's see what the public thinks here, too.
Boy.
This is the American Journalist study published by the AmericanJournalist.org. Pretty comprehensive. And so I'm going to ask you a few things that come out of the survey. Okay. How many journalists in this country are college graduates? What percentage of journalists? Gino, first. What percentage of American journalists are college grads?
90%.
Okay, Veronica?
95 in this country?
Yeah.
95%.
96%.
Yes.
Veronica's got one on you there, Gina.
Is this The Price is Right?
However, It's like The Price is Right. The Price is Wrong. How many journalists were college grads in 1971, Gino?
42%.
Veronica?
12%.
58%.
Oh.
So
Way off.
just over half, about 50 plus years ago, almost all, 96% now. That I don't know exactly how I feel about that. Maybe not great, but that's a big change.
I think there's a lot that you can say about our, whether or not a college degree sort of informs journalism, but whether it informs maybe any profession that you get into these days. I think we're having a reckoning with our with our sort of the way that we structured our society around college.
Yeah, I'm $40,000 in debt, and I couldn't tell you one thing I learned about journalism from going to school.
But also, I mean, I do think that there's value in learning how to, I don't know, parse through documents, like, the stuff that you do in the newsroom every single day. Do you think that having gone to college in general makes those things easier for you?
No.
No, not at all.
Working in the field made it easier for me. I mean, I consider this a trade job more than anything else, where you have to know how to do the things, and how to interview, know how to find documents, know how to write, which is an art form. I believe it's an art form, but it's also a skill that you have to learn by doing. I went to RIT. By the time I graduated, I feel bad because one of our interns is from RIT, but by the time I graduated, I had more experience in the field than most of my professors did, because I was freelancing all through college. And so did I learn anything from going to school? Nothing that I can really get off the top of my head.
So maybe a little too much gatekeeping.
Yeah, the extreme amount of gatekeeping. You cannot get a journalism job nowadays without a college education, and the amount it pays to be a journalist, it's egregious to expect a person to have to pay for a bachelor's degree in order to work at a job where you're making, at best, slightly over the median income.
Well, what percentage of American journalists are white?
Overwhelming majority.
78%.
Veronica?
70%.
Right at about 80% still. Yeah. So, and that hasn't moved much. What is the breakdown? By the way, that's one for Gino now. Gino and Veronica tied 1-1. What percentage of American journalists are male? In the male-female breakdown, what is it? Got to go with Gino first here on this one.
I feel like it has to be closer at 55%.
Okay. Veronica?
I was going to say 60%.
It's 59-41 male-female. Yep, almost on the money there. And that has moved over time, but it's leveled off. That's plateaued in the last couple of decades. And lastly, so it's 2-1 Veronica. Here you go, Gino. You got to tie it up right here. What percentage of journalists say they are very satisfied working in their jobs? Veronica first.
100% of journalists love their jobs. My non-cheeky answer would be like, in 2025?
Yeah.
Maybe 50%.
Okay.
20%.
29%.
29%.
Of American journalists say they are very satisfied working their jobs. In 1971, it was 50%. So,
wow. Even then.
Yeah, I think most people will just tell
That
you,
breaks my heart.
people are negative about their jobs.
Mm-hmm.
But journalists are very negative about their jobs. So it's 2-2, and I was going to give you one more fifth one, but I told Veronica about this before the show even started. So, I mean, like, Veronica knows the answer here, but I'll just see how Gino does on this. Journalist perception of social media. Is social media making a positive impact on journalism? 2014, Gino, what do you think the breakdown was when you asked the average American journalist, what percentage said that social media is making a positive impact on journalism?
76%.
70% in 2014 said it was positive. What percent now say it's positive?
12%.
26%.
Wow,
I'm
that's
surprised-
a
I'm
lot
surprised
better
it's even
than I
that
thought. Yeah.
I'm surprised.
Those are our content creator journalists.
Yeah, exactly. But it really is. Essentially, those numbers have flipped in a decade, and flipped for a lot of probably pretty obvious reasons. Not the least of which is that if you ask people under the age of 30 in this country where they get their news from, the biggest source that they will tell you is TikTok, and journalists feel very threatened by that. So, it looked like you were going to jump in there with something.
No,
there,
that
Jim.
just sucks. That's terrible.
Wait,
hate that.
Wait, what's
Yeah,
what part
I
of
was
it
gonna
is
say,
terrible?
what is it that sucks?
Pretty much all of it, but the TikTok part of it is TikTok is not a good avenue for doing journalism on.
Okay, can I just be like the token optimist here?
Contrarian or optimist? Optimist.
I would say optimist.
Okay.
I hear what you're saying, Gino, about like TikTok is not the place, but okay, but why isn't it the place?
Why can't it be me?
And why
Listen.
can't it be the place?
I think it could be, and I also think that it has melted the brains of an entire generation, where the ability to think critically about something has been completely replaced by the dopamine rush of scrolling through video after video, feeding you nonsense. So is it something that you could use as an avenue to put out good journalism? I think it absolutely is. Is it being used for that? No. I think people are trying to, but is it anything in the face of what TikTok is mainly used for, which is silly nonsense? No, I don't think it's even competitive in any way, shape, or form. And that doesn't just go for TikTok. That's pretty much every platform at this point. It's just all instant gratification, monkey brain kind of stuff.
Well, that's okay. I think it is worth saying that I agree with some of the concern that Gino is expressing. I'm just going to be honest. I mean, like, I don't. If I were to choose which way where the society was pivoting, I wouldn't be going in that direction myself. But I don't get to choose. And on top of that, to Gino's point, it's not just a 46-year-old guy who's bummed about it, or Gino or anybody else. When Greg Lukianoff is one of the co-authors of a number of books about the effects of media, the effects of culture on teens and young adults, and helped put together a survey and found that American teenagers will tell you they're either addicted or they're on TikTok all the time. Nearly half will also tell you they wish TikTok were never invented. They see it's like they see it as the piece of chocolate cake that's always in the kitchen. They're like, I wish it weren't there. It's there. I'm going to eat it. Like, I wish it weren't. Like, get it out of here, because if it's here, I'm going to eat it. That's TikTok for a lot of people. But it's there, Gino. We're not going back, man. Like, so, and if TikTok goes away or if it gets banned, something else will take its place. So we have kind of given up the floor. We've given up that arena in this high-minded effort to keep newspapers and print, like that kind of thing.
And radio stations.
And radio, I mean, like, in ways that have prevented us from being where everybody else is. So I think it can be, we have to find ways to do what we do on those platforms, right?
And we try to. I mean, I'm begrudgingly doing videos for Instagram now and have been for a couple years now. I never wanted to do that. It's not my thing, but people seem to like them. And if people like them and this is a good way to get stories out there, then I'm going to do it. So
Veronica, Gino's always so disappointed when people like love his stuff, because they do. They really appreciate his work. They're like, oh no. It's another,
how dare they?
I think though that like there are some good points being made here, but one is definitely that the kids are on TikTok. Whether or not we think they should be on TikTok, that's not my job.
Right.
I mean, it is my job as a parent maybe, but like as a journalist, I can't really do anything about the fact that they're there. And being upset that our society is continuing to like go in this direction of prioritizing and being addicted to these like short form vertical videos is not going to do anything for journalism. So meeting people where they are, I think, is very squarely the mission of public media. It used to be that we would put television on the airwaves for free, or we'd put educational content on the radio for free. And that's how we reached people with our information, our news, our education. And now I think we have to reach people where they are on TikTok, on YouTube, on whatever social platform is going to be emerging in the next year. And trying to do it in a way that's like aligned with what we are proud of at WXXI and other public media stations, but also in a way that like engages people and keeps them informed and improves their life and like all these other things that we are in this business to do.
yeah, I'm with you there. I mean, we have to now. And I can be the curmudgeon, and I probably will be at times. Gino, you and I can be curmudgeons at times, but that's still fun.
No, me?
But That's where people are going to be. And if that's where they're going to be, we've got to be there. We have to. I think it's an obligation that we have to the community.
And also, just to like explore this further, like what is WXXI's role as like an educational organization in helping people understand what their relationship to their phones should be, and helping parents understand what their child's relationship to their phone should be? Like, why can't we set the tone and in some ways give people a way to think about how to sort of engage in that media literacy that we're talking about? Like, what are we doing to make sure that people are informed in that way so that they can carry that into like all the interactions that they have with media outside of WXXI? I don't know what that looks like, but I'm going to bring it out to you guys. What do you guys think?
Gino?
That's a big question. I mean, I don't know what the right way is. I think we're in this very, very hard time period where it almost feels like it's we're in like an intermediary phase. Like a lot of the really establishment social media companies have changed a lot over the past few years. Twitter is the best example of that. I mean, Twitter has turned completely crazy. And it's not, that used to be the best avenue to reach people where they were locally. I used it a lot.
We used it a ton on this program.
Yeah, and it was actually great for that. And then the shift happened where, Elon Musk bought it, and it turned into, I can't even, it's hard to describe what it is now. It's just pure vitriol. And the only people you're going to engage with on there are anonymous accounts that want to scream at people. So what is the best avenue for being able to put out good journalism and educate the public and reach? I think our biggest challenge is reaching young people where they are. I don't know how it's done right. Maybe there is no right way. But I think there is an argument for just trying to get everything on everything and seeing what sticks and what doesn't.
Flood the space.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
have. The thing that we have to try to resist is cynicism. Cynical that things have changed, therefore they are worse. Cynical that, every oncoming generation will do things in a way that is less healthy for them, and therefore I don't want to participate in it.
But cynical in a way that also gives us like this sort of moral high ground to
Right.
opt out.
Right.
Where it's just like, I'm not going to be a part of that because I don't think that it has value. It has value for the people who are on it. And so long as we continue to think like, well, there's nothing of value on TikTok, then we're not going to want to engage on that platform. And then we're missing out on an opportunity to tell stories, to tell the stories that we're already reporting and telling in other ways, and tell them to an audience that probably would really benefit from them, honestly. And yeah, I don't think we've connected those dots yet. But like Gino says, like we're definitely in a transition phase where we are thinking more about it.
Well, and Veronica and I were talking before the program about conversations that the New York Times' Ezra Klein has recently had about how education is having to change. You probably heard the stat that popped in my brain, which is that in 1974, what percentage of American teenagers read at least 6 books for fun? 1974. What percentage of American teenagers, and I think Veronica already heard this podcast.
I did, but I don't remember stats.
Gino.
I'm not good with numbers.
82%.
It was 60.
Really?
60%.
Okay.
60% of American teenagers read at least 6 books for fun in 1974. What about last year? How many American teenagers read at least half a dozen books for fun?
14%.
It's 11, and I thought that was high. I'm like, 11%? That's 1 out of 9? No way. I would have put it in the single digits. And I bring that up because when print journalism was the only thing, and then radio and TV come along, the print people were like, TV is going to rot your brains. It is terrible for journalism. It is terrible for news consumption. It's a terrible way to explain the world. You can't do it. And
but wasn't it? Like, can we be real for a second?
well, yeah, I mean, in many ways.
I'm not talking about like local television news that does the best they can with what they have to bring stories about like the community, but I'm talking about the model of television journalism. Like, you can make an argument that it created a business around rotting people's brains and keeping them engaged and sort of pushing that fear that we talked
I mean,
that
the
Gino talked about.
24-hour news cycle, I mean, if you're in a daily market, how do you fill that? Just do crime stories over and over and over, and you get that dopamine rush and people are locked in, and all that's just moved to Facebook. It's scary. And I think to the point, just the whole model of profit-driven news, beyond just social media, is kind of the problem here. Like, we have these outlets that have popped up in the past few years, Newsmax, OAN, a little bit older, but Breitbart, that like exploded in popularity. Why? Not because the quality of the journalism is great, because it was selling a product, and that product is fear and affirmation. And it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that is a very powerful combination, and it makes a lot of money. So that is also killing the journalism market.
I just bring up some of that change in our norms to point out that, like, we are just not reading at length. And the same way that we feel if we're in our curmudgeon phase about TikTok and the like is how a lot of people have felt about any change that comes. So the question just becomes to journalists, what are you going to do? And I think I agree with Veronica that we don't have the moral high ground that says, I'm sitting it out, not doing it. I think we have to be there. So that's part of where I think we're going. Let's take a break here, and let's bring in a couple of people who are younger than us. The
future.
Younger than us, for sure. And they'll have a lot to say. They're going to bring a lot of insight on the other side of this break. We're talking about journalism in 2025. Gino Finelli, Veronica Volk, Evan Dawson from WXXI News. We'll come right back here.
One of the best ways to support WXXI is to become a sustaining member. You give a little bit each month, and your contribution renews automatically every year. Sustaining members provide a stable source of revenue for your favorite programs. For as little as $5 a month, you can become a sustaining member at WXXI.org.
This is Connections. I'm Evan Dawson. You know, I've been so immersed in this conversation, I even mentioned the phone number, and I see the phone is ringing. So it's 844-295-TALK. If you... Unlike my 13-year-old who says nobody makes a phone call anymore. He's always like, why would you ever give a phone number? Nobody makes a phone call. Well, some people do. And there you go. 844-295-TALK. 844-295-8255. 263-WXXI if you're in Rochester. 263-9994. I'm happy to say he's wrong. People call this program every day. But you can email us, connections@WXXI.org. You can join us on the YouTube chat if you're watching on the WXXI News YouTube channel. And hello in studio to, Veronica, I know as the coordinator, as someone who's heading up the student journalism program, you want to do some introductions here?
Sure, absolutely. We have 2 summer interns for our news department, and I'll let you guys introduce yourselves. You want to go first, Natasha?
Sure, I can go first. Hi, I'm Natasha Kaiser. I'm a 4th-year photojournalism student at RIT.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Roisin Meyer. I'm an international relations and economics major at the University of Rochester, and I'm also entering my 4th year.
All right, and so we've had great experience with the students, and I'm going to be clumsy, like, where do you get your news? But I always want to know, right?
I just want to say before we get into this that we do the internship program for a variety of reasons. Number one, I really like working with college students because I really like the idea of introducing people to the brand as not just like a place where you can get your news, but also maybe a potential work environment. But one thing I always do in the program is talk to people about where they get their news, how they get their news, what they want to see more of. What do you as a 20-something care about? Because like I said in the beginning, I think it's important to stay in touch with people who are the perceived audience to get real answers about where and what they want to see. So.
Yeah, so let me just ask Natasha and Roisin then, if you want to just describe a little bit of what you want to do, not only with this experience, but in your future. So I'll start with Natasha on that.
I love immersive storytelling within the community, and I think that's what brought me to WXXI originally, was the ability to become part of the community and become a journalist within the community. And even that with RIT, I would love to move to DC afterwards. I have a huge interest in politics and human rights and international relations. And I think that's what brought me, is telling the stories of the people in our community.
Okay.
One of the
Roisin?
things that I
Oh,
hear,
go
I'm
ahead.
sorry, I'm going to jump in.
Yeah.
We'll get to you in a second, Roisin. But one of the things I hear in Natasha's answer, by the way, that I just want to sort of like underline is this idea that like good storytelling is universal. No matter what platform you're on and no matter how old you are, like you want to be told a good story. And so
Yes.
that's something that like no matter what phase of your career you're in or whatever media you're reporting for is a valuable skill to have. So
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's universal. That will always be the case.
And that could be a good way to reach people, like just a good kind of standard to keep in your mind, whether you're on TikTok or on a talk show.
Roisin, what about you?
I have had brief experience within the political science department when talking about local media and how it truly impacts people's information and how they share information, and it's also a source of community bonding. And it's something I've been more interested in with research in general and just like learning how people connect and how that also can feed into protecting democratic ideals. One of the books that we most recently read in one of our political science classes, Tocqueville, Democracy in America, it specifically talks about this. And I mean, at the time, he was targeting newspapers as an important source or media source for improving democratic ideals. But as we see now with WXXI and other like local news source stations, these are important things that we need to preserve. And it's something that I've been looking into getting involved in.
So I'm going to do that cliche thing, though. Take us through your news habits, then. I'll start with you, Roisin. So what's a daily news consumption diet for you look like?
I would say, similar to my peers, I do consume a little bit of, I would say, just politics and news on social media platforms, as we've talked about on the show with Instagram. Not so much TikTok. I feel like there's definitely an awareness with my peers in general that TikTok cannot always have the most factual information. But I also do consume BBC News podcasts to try to get a more international or global perspective. And then in general, the Washington Post, just newspapers online.
Online,
Yes.
yeah. What about you, Natasha?
I feel kind of similarly. I feel like I'm subscribed to every major news publication that you can think of off the top of your head. And when I wake up, I'm normally checking like Instagram and stuff because I follow most of their like their socials. And I think Veronica and I talked about this. I also follow a lot of like politics-based photographers because I get a lot of my like visual news that way instead of just primarily through the actual like publications and articles. I also look at the photographers' Instagrams and see what kind of coverage they're doing and what they're seeing within their own camera lens.
Okay. And do you feel the same way about TikTok?
I think kind of like I'm a middle ground between Gino and Veronica of like it's not super conducive to getting the best information because it's so short form. I feel like TikTok, they've expanded how long their videos are, so it's not as problematic, but especially with like that short form, you're not getting the whole story. And I feel like that can become problematic to spreading misinformation. So I don't think it's the best way to consume information, but I definitely don't think it's the worst like outlet to be consuming it for.
Now, these are news interns. Are we self-selecting for pretty media literate people who have a good sense of maybe the shortcomings of each individual platform, or is this indicative of anything to you, Veronica?
I mean, like, I'm looking for students who are smart and care about news. So I think that this sample size is very specific to the more media literate side of college students in their media consumption. But I do want to say that, like, one thing that both of you guys said is that you're following people on social media who are sharing the news. And this reflects like a total shift because even at the Washington Post, which you mentioned, Roisin, like there's a shift from this trust in an institution to a trust in a like an influencer or a creator or an individual who is seen as like an authentic voice on a subject. And like I actually pulled some cuts from TikTok, from their WAPO TikTok guy. Do you know who Dave Jorgensen is? Does anyone know? Oh my God. No, he's not a good example then. Anyway, he's a video producer and he's a journalist for the Washington Post, but he makes TikToks. And I pulled a clip from him where he's talking about how the Qatari royal family was going to donate that luxury jet to
Right.
the Department of Defense. So this is like a very TikTok presentation of that story.
The Air Force One plane sucks. It's like 3 decades old.
Hey, we have this $400 million plane just laying around. Do you want it?
Really? This doesn't seem ethical. Is it ethical?
Officially, no decision has been made.
Sure, but-
And it would be temporary. What is he doing?
He's writing on social media that it's okay.
That sounds a whole lot like emolument, which I specifically said you cannot do.
Emolument. After I'm president, it would just be donated to my library, so it's fine. That doesn't make it okay.
It's not a done deal.
but it could be.
You know what is a done deal? China and the U.S. just agreed to lower tariffs on each other.
For 90 days.
Part of the deal.
So, I mean, like, here's a guy who is sort of known for his TikTok videos, but he's spreading information. He's telling stories. He's doing it in a very TikTok way. He's one guy, but he's also representing sort of this legacy media organization. And I think that he's a good example maybe of like this transition that we're talking about and that we're seeing. And maybe something that maybe it's like a way in for us to think about how we can position ourselves in a way where we're doing something similar.
Yeah, and so, Gina, what did you make of what you just heard there?
I think Veronica's right. It is a way of conveying information. It's not the way that I would do it, but you know, it works. And you know, just a thought that I'm having as we're like having this conversation is we're focusing a lot on like the younger generation, which I think is still reachable. You can still find avenues to promote good media understanding to the younger generation because there's still time. But let's like not pretend that the baby boomer generation wasn't fried by Facebook. I mean, the media literacy of older people is also dreadful.
You think we're too obsessed with Gen Z? And...
I think the part that I don't like about it is it starts to come off at a certain point like, oh, these kids are so dumb. Like the adults are really dumb too. Like every generation is really bad at this.
Dumb.
That's the first I've not used the word dumb. Oh my goodness. But the point is well taken. I wouldn't say dumb. I would say anyone would be susceptible to the negative charms.
Let's put it this way. Ignorant. And everyone is ignorant in some way, shape, or form. No one knows everything. Now, someone's ability to understand one subject might not be as good as the ability to understand politics or understand, geopolitical structures or the economy or whatever new subject that we're writing about. That might not be completely within their grasp, and it's our job to educate them on that. But when we're in this kind of period of time where you can find something that can reaffirm whatever thing your brain can pop up of how things are actually working, you end up with people that are proud of their ignorance. That is a scary part of where we're at right now, too. So, yes, there is the part of, like, we can still reach some people, and we still can educate particularly the younger generation, but also, everyone. But also, we are facing an insurmountable barrier of the love and adoration of not understanding the world, the proud anti-educational mindset that a lot of people do have right now.
Well, educational attainment is the single biggest dividing line in American politics right now. Anti-elite, sort of striking this anti-elite pose is very popular on the platforms you're describing. Let me say, Andrew, I'm going to take your phone call in just a second. In that TikTok clip, I actually heard a lot of John and Hank Green. I used to watch there is like this fast-moving description of events or ideas, and the Vlog Brothers vlog. What do you call it? Vlog. Thank you. There you go. I mean, I think they still do what they do, but I mean, maybe not as prolifically. But I hear a lot there. So that's probably going to be with us going forward here. You have these very fast-moving media and platforms.
It is. It's fast moving. They're packing a lot of information into a short period of time. But isn't that what we do every single day? I mean, not on your show, Evan, but like the majority of my job is taking Gino's story and trying to distill it down to 60 seconds so that we can fit in a local break on the radio.
We should have this show, and we should have that, and we should have everything in between.
Exactly.
That's what we should be doing. And so before I get Andrew's phone call, let me just ask our guests here from Gen Z, if they want, what did you hear there? I mean, like in that clip, Natasha, to you.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because cross-platform social media is so like new and it's so prevalent to what we do as journalists. And so even stuff like that, you listen to it and you watch it and you think, I wonder what he's talking about. Like if you don't know what's going on and you don't know the background of that, you're like, that makes me want to read more about that. And I think that's what we need to be encouraging as journalists is like cross-platform. Like you can have that TikTok video that's satirical and that like gives you a snippet of information, but you also want to go read more. You want to watch a longer form video that explains the satirical side of that.
And the question is, will people follow up and do that?
Exactly. Yeah. And I think we need to be focusing on how can we encourage that kind of movement because algorithmically it's bad. It causes echo chambers and we need to figure out a way to break that algorithm of like just consuming the same content over and over again and start actually trying to go cross-platform and read different publications.
Do you agree with Gino's point that older generation, in Gino's words, the baby boomers are struggling with?
I think it's interesting because like I think like 10 or 15 years ago it was all like don't believe everything you read on the internet or see on the internet, and then now it's like look at this AI baby runway. Like what are we doing? Like it's not even.
I don't know. What are we doing?
I don't know. But
Facebook has become like a parody of AI videos now at this point.
Oh.
Is that like on purpose? Is it to show the absurdity?
I don't know, but I'm very, very turned off by that.
Yeah.
I want to hear Roshin's thoughts on
Yeah, Roshin.
Well, I agree with Natasha's comment on echo chambers. I think that just can affect anyone in general. One book that really stood out to me was Anna Lembke. She's a Stanford psychiatrist, and she wrote this book called Dopamine Nation. And dopamine has been a word that's been flying out of this discussion a lot. Mm-hmm. And in terms of echo chambers, people just keep consuming this abundant content that we have. Humans are not used to this amount of abundance, and we're meant to indulge. We want to achieve that pleasure. It's like a balance between pain and pleasure, and we're conditioned in like an animalistic instinct to obtain that pleasure. And so that keeps wanting us to consume more. And then when it comes to these echo chambers, we tend to diverge. It starts to create a lot of polarization because people are just with the algorithms on these platforms like TikTok and Instagram, even Instagram Reels. I know some of my peers will try to delete TikTok to get off the content and then immediately get addicted to Instagram Reels. It's an endless cycle. But yeah, it's just I think it creates a lot more polarization, and not that people who are like, I mean, I think I fall victim to it too. I wouldn't say that people are necessarily dumb or like not like as intelligent or they're being ignorant. I think they're just being like conditioned through the social media to believe these things and think that they are in the right because everyone else on the social media is also saying that they are in the right, and they're not seeing any opposition to their beliefs or biases.
Yeah.
And I think that is an important part of this topic.
Let me grab this phone call from Andrew, who's been waiting. Hey, Andrew, go ahead.
I watch a lot of different news. I like to watch MSNBC and CNN and a little bit of Fox, only the Fox News Hour. And I usually just watch the last half hour of that. That's from 6:30 to 7. But I like to see as many different angles as I can get. But I stay away from the far, like Rachel Maddow, I don't waste my time with her, or Laura Ingraham, I don't waste my time with her, because they're too far gone with their stuff. But if you really want to understand what's going on in the world, I have been having such a good time reading the Wall Street Journal lately. Because, like the other day, there was a guy, they're older people that lived these news stories, write letters to the Wall Street Journal, and you can read them every day. And the New York Times too a little bit. But you hear such an accurate thing of what's going on. Like this guy the other day wrote a story about how he had dinner with Fidel Castro at the president of Harvard's house in 1959, and he was talking about the stuff that's going on in Harvard today. And it was really interesting to read his perspective on the kind of how far Harvard has gone to, out of bounds with they just don't listen to any other point of view except for their leftist ideology. Anyway, another letter in the Wall Street Journal the other day was about a guy that was feeding kids candy in North Korea after they were cleaning up after the war, and how he was complaining about today's U.S. aid being canceled, and he was talking about the principles of how good U.S. aid is when you do it right. But anyway, my vote is for everything all at once all the time.
Everything all at once.
Can I interest you in everything all the time?
Yes.
I think that shows like there's still an appetite for long form journalism. I think from a lot of people. I don't know if that's the norm anymore. This is sort of the danger of getting into a little bit of a navel gazing place where we're like, we make long form journalism, so everyone must love it.
Well, but maybe all of you can. Maybe this is a good place to kind of steer this as we get ready to try to land this $400 million plane this hour. Back in 2000, probably 2005 or 6, about 20 years ago, when I was a young reporter for the 11 p.m. news at the local ABC news station, we flew in these consultants from Texas, and they told us that nobody had attention spans anymore, so all stories on the air had to be 30 seconds or less. And that in the 11 o'clock news, we had to have 30 news stories every night at 11. That's a 30-minute block of news. Do you know how many actual minutes of that 30 minutes was actual news? Not commercials, not weather, not sports? 9. 9 minutes. We needed 30 stories because no one had attention spans. And I was like, well, we're doomed. But now we're in the age of podcasts where the most listened to podcasts can be 2-3 hours long. I don't know if everybody is listening to every minute of Theo Von or many of the others. And by the way, there's a whole gender breakdown. I mean, young men and young women are listening to totally different podcasts. And I'm sure our guests from Gen Z can talk about that. But all of which I'm saying is, V, is it like people will have an attention span if it's for a certain thing? Maybe that's a podcast, but not for news consumption, actual just straight reporting. I mean, are we flexing the muscles differently? Because clearly we can stay with something for a longer time.
I mean, I can't speak to like the neurology of what is actually happening, but here's my sense based on like what I'm hearing from people who are much smarter than me. We don't have the attention span. Like we just don't. We are losing it. We are trained to sort of want new things every second. And actually our brain is already made that way as sort of an evolutionary advantage. It's just that our current media environment reinforces that in the worst possible way. We're not reading anymore, so we are losing a skill around sort of rapt attention of a single thing.
Yeah.
But I think that media consumption of podcasts is easier for people as they're doing other things, which makes it possible to consume a long-form news product while you're washing the dishes, walking your dog, driving to work, or doing something else. That's like the way that we sneak it in. You're not going to be able to read like a full New York Times feature, but you will maybe listen to the Daily on your way to work. So I think that that's a great place where we can reach people. And we're doing it right now, by the way, if you want to follow Connections Podcast, anywhere you get your podcasts.
Anywhere they're sold. Well, okay, so just briefly here. Do you and the men your age consume different podcasts, generally speaking, you think, Natasha?
Yeah, I would say so. Probably.
I mean, it's such a different thing. This is the first time we're seeing this. Men and women will consume entirely different media. I mean, because of the availability, to Gino's point. You can just chase down whatever fires you up or whatever confirms your biases.
Well, there's that. And like the Instagram algorithm, because of, who I am, my demographic, force feeds me Joe Rogan. Like, it's like if I scroll on there, it's going to be Joe Rogan over and over and over. And I just hate that man so much. And it just, no matter what I do, it just will not go away. It is shoved down my throat. And, it makes me think, well, that's why partially his podcast is geared towards, again, my demographic. But also it's, funneled to them. So, yeah, I get it.
So, somebody in the algorithm will saw a picture of you, and they're like, that guy's going to love it.
Oh, yeah.
We need to get that guy.
I mean, look, if you look at me,
they're not giving
up
on you, Gino Finelli. Gino did not have coffee this morning or something. You came out really loaded for...
Actually, I had a lot of coffee this morning.
Okay. And as we get ready to wrap here, Tom wrote in asking, how would you design a media literacy course starting in schools now?
I don't know, but
I
I'm
don't
going to
know.
think about that.
It's a good question.
It's also
It's a
like
really important
I
question.
think that it's important for WXXI to start answering that question because like we have to think about ourselves not just as a news and information organization, but as we already do. We have an education department. What can we do to sort of make media literacy a cornerstone of what we do? So yeah, great question.
Natasha, 30 seconds. What would you want
I
young
don't
people in
know.
schools to learn?
That's quite the ask. I would say probably how to spot reputable sources. I think that's something that we learned when I was growing up, and it's like firsthand accounts and sources and stuff like that. I think that's one of the most important parts of consuming journalism and consuming art and stuff like that is figuring out who's making it.
Okay, Roisin?
I totally agree with Natasha. We were always taught when we were young to stick to academic engines and just news sources that were reputable, that people knew, not blogs. And I think in general, also just to question everything and deepen your research in everything that you do. If you see a source or you see something that kind of piques your interest, look into it more because there's more to the story than meets the eye.
Yeah, Roisin's point there, Gino, is about bias, and I think we should be teaching all forms of bias and critical thinking younger and younger and younger.
I'm gonna offer a really stupid analogy here, but I eat Raisin Bran because it's good for you and it's a good source of fiber. And in the cereal aisle, there's a galaxy of colors screaming at you from every direction. And you can get whatever garbage you want to. Most of it is garbage. But the Raisin Bran is still there, and that doesn't mean that it has lost its value and the health benefits that it offers. So you just have to know to seek out what you know is good for you. And maybe you can have garbage every now and then too.
Is WXXI Raisin Bran?
No, I want to question whether or not Raisin Bran is actually healthy. So question everything. I think Raisin Bran is a sugared cereal with good branding.
I get the
just
one,
want to get a second source on that.
without the sugar.
Second source.
That does not exist.
It does, yeah. You have to really look for it, though.
That's fake news. Also, Gino's point about the food dyes, they're going away too, brother, so don't worry. No more colored cereal soon. Anyway, hey, this was fun, everybody. Thank you all for being here. We'll continue this, I'm sure, on another day soon.
Every single day.
And we'll have more connections in a moment.
This program is a production of WXXI Public Radio. The views expressed do not necessarily represent those of this station, its staff, management, or underwriters. The broadcast is meant for the private use of our audience. Any rebroadcast or use in another medium without expressed written consent of WXXI is strictly prohibited. Connections with Evan Dawson is available as a podcast. Just click on the Connections link at WXXInews.org.
Support for your public radio station comes from our members and from Bob Johnson Auto Group, proud supporter of Connections with Evan Dawson. Believing an informed public makes for a stronger community. BobJohnsonAutoGroup.com.